It's December 6th, 2014. And I was just describing what happened with Lonnie Ballinger, some of the things that happened. It's not everything that happened, because I was actually also at her house, and I was assaulted at her house by her boyfriend with knives when I was lying down on the ground. I was having to stay overnight, and all of a sudden I woke up, and he was over me, like on top of me, and I tried to fight him off, and he used knives. So that rape strategy where I was lying down and the use of knives and threats were being made is something that Lonnie Ballinger's boyfriend used against me. And then she herself and the FBI and a cop were using the telephone ringing, intimidation, and threat rape strategy against me from a private beautician office. And so then I also was just now remembering, and not having planned to remember this part, I was also taken around in a car with Lonnie Ballinger. And they also experimented with me and in the car, and made me do blowjobs for people in their car, and I believe it was cops and FBI. Maybe some of Jim's friends. So basically, the Ballingers were incorporating all of the techniques and tactics that different groups had practiced for a very long time against me. And they sort of were trying them all out and reinforcing everything. And then I was taken over to Sandy's house, and Sandy lived in a completely different part of town, and she had a beautician office of her own in her own house. Like, she had a room set aside that had a beautician chair or barber chair with a pedal that you could elevate up or down, and everything like that. And she was babysitting me sometimes. And anyway, I was being, what I remember from her place is that she was using lollipops and popsicles and that kind of thing to teach me to do fellatio. So she was involved in, I'd sit in this chair, and then she'd want me to imitate her, and I had to practice. And there's usually another woman there too. This Washington State CASA worker, Sue, she drove over there to be involved. And then there were a couple of other people. And Janet Bechtold was there one time, involved. And when they were forcing me to learn this fellatio thing, that was after Janet Bechtold, which I will get into later, and pretty much her entire family, had raped or molested me when I was really little. So they were doing these weird things to me and trying to make it seem really natural. Other times not trying to make it seem natural because there was like torture involved. But when I was younger, they tried to make it into some kind of a natural thing, I think. And then I resisted. And so then I was getting tortured all the time. I think they thought that if they kept doing those things to me, that one day I just wouldn't care. Maybe I'd like it. But I never liked it. It was egregious child abuse. So I was at Sandy's house. They were repeatedly making me do this oral sex practice stuff, which a few other women at different places also made me do. And then Sandy was inviting men. Men were coming over during their lunch break from this construction company that they worked with. And there were some men from Canada. For whatever reason, the Canadians liked them. And I believe it had to do with the fact that they were involved in helping them with drugs. But there were Canadians that were showing up at this Sandy Ballinger's house to molest me. And the other people that were showing up to molest me were, like, from what I could tell, construction workers that had gotten time off for their lunch break. And so they'd put me in this chair, this beautician chair, and then they'd make me lean over. They'd strap me down, and sometimes use the electrocution. Often use the electrocution head brace on me, and then force me to do a blowjob for these different men that were coming in. I mean, these were adult men. And then she got her daughter involved in it too. So, like, basically it became a family affair to, as it was for several of these government families. They involved, like, almost every single member. In some of the families, every member was included and involved in rape and torture of me. It was like this bizarre, multi-generational scheme. And I really don't know what they were getting out of it. I know that a lot of money was being exchanged. But why they would, how it's possible that there are that many corrupt people, really don't know. And then how you can get almost entire families to do that kind of thing. I guess that's where they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Because some of these trees were pretty rotten. So family trees that the government used. It was like a forest of rotten trees. So basically, then they gave me poison. Because then Sandy also had me, forced me to drink hair permanent solution. And, how were they getting away with pouring this toxic, burning, permanent hair solution? I mean, these are serious chemicals into my throat, making me swallow them. I was getting, like, throat. I had throat damage from it, and it would heal up, but I seriously had throat damage. And what they would do is they'd force me to drink all of this stuff, like hair permanent solution, seriously, and then they'd let it burn and have the effects of torture kick in, and then they would give me ipecac or a bunch of charcoal and then forced me to throw that up. So it was kind of like they wanted me to feel all the torture and to have damage done to me, but then they didn't want to have any chemicals remaining in my body. And I think possibly because they're paranoid that if I went to a hospital or someone ended up taking me, I could prove that they were poisoning me. So they were doing this weird forced regurgitation of extremely dangerous and toxic chemicals. And so they were doing that kind of thing, and from that chair, from the barber or beautician chair that Sandy had, They also practiced this thing of, do you want to call the police? And I'd say, occasionally I would try to hope that someone was being sympathetic finally. And then they'd make a call, and then they'd hang up the phone, and they'd wait for the phone to ring. And then when the phone rang, I'd talk to someone, like a police officer, on the phone. And then they'd either pick up the phone and say she just has some problems, she's mentally ill, and she's been diagnosed. Like they went off on this huge mental illness thing over the phone to them, but they wanted me to see that they were telling them I was mentally ill, and that they had that power and control over me. And then other times, cops would show up at that location, and then force me to do a blowjob on them. They weren't taking a report about me. They were going over to show me that that no one was going to help me, and now I had to do a blowjob for them too. So this phone ringing thing, while I was in a seated position, like this rape strategy that I've mentioned before, that was repeated several times by Sandy Ballinger as well. Not just Lonnie one time at her beautician place, but at Sandy's place it was repeated a few times. Many times, actually. We practiced that phone thing. So, so between all of these Ballingers, they sort of were like refining and trying out all of the programmed responses that the government wanted me to have when their own government employees raped me, or they got their kids to rape me. Because then later what happened was the men or women that were raping me then sent their kids out. When I was older, and then their kids were older, they had their kids go out on behalf of the government to rape me. And they used the exact same tactics and triggers. So what was really strange is that Erica Ballinger was one of the individuals involved in that. Christy Ballinger, who electrocuted me several times by putting this head brace on my head and electrocuting me, she ended up being the person to crown me, quote-unquote, homecoming queen. So here she is out in public. It was like I was a big laughing stock. Like the triumph of the child torturers in Sherwood. Because I was on this football field, and here's Christy, my former torturer, putting this crown on my head after taking it off of her head, like she'd never, electrocuted me. And the stands were full of just government, sorry to say, but government assholes. All their kids were. And they were stalkers. The government forced me to go to that school because they had all of their kids collected there, or a large group of them, and they felt they could control the things that happened to me because they wanted to isolate me from any normal people. So basically, all of my character references, my quote-unquote friends, I didn't have any. I, at times, tried to forget things, or I did completely forget things, didn't place people as to who they were and how I knew them from decades earlier. But they were all working against me. So it meant that I was completely on my own. And that worked for them because they would all committed such horrendous crimes against me. It made it easier for them to just all collectively say that, oh, this didn't happen, or I was nuts, or poor girl has problems, that kind of thing. So then there was more that happened with the Ballingers.